If density is the key to housing affordability, how is it that New York and San Francisco, two of the densest cities in the United States, are also the most expensive? We've also seen this question asked in Canada about Vancouver, but we're going to focus on the US in this video. First of all, this is a bit of a misunderstanding of the yes in my backyard pro-density position. What makes housing affordable isn't density per se, but rather abundance, which can be achieved by building up, building out, or both. YIMBYs just believe that allowing housing in built-up areas that already have jobs and infrastructure has benefits versus sprawl and outward expansion. Still though, look at all that housing. How can this place or this place be unaffordable? New York and San Francisco have the number 1 and number 2 highest average rent in the US among big metro areas. Looking at existing density misses an important detail. These are old cities. Half of New York City's current housing comes from before 1952. Half of San Francisco's housing comes from before 1945. Inheriting a large stock of legacy housing doesn't mean that they build a lot or make it easy to build today. Like a lot of other cities, both SF and NYC have tightened their housing rules over time. 40% of all existing buildings in Manhattan would not be legal to build today due to factors like height. In San Francisco, 34% of existing buildings would be illegal to build today. This apartment building breaks multiple rules. It's too tall for the 40-foot height limit here, and it has too many units for the size of the lot in its RM4 zone. It only exists like this because it was built in 1926. The adjacent building from 1999 follows the newer rules and is much smaller. Nearby, these two buildings are also illegal in their more restrictive RM1 zone. These are not cherry-picked examples. Outside of downtown, most blocks in San Francisco have multiple buildings that would not be allowed under modern zoning. What is a little unique about these examples, though, is that they're heritage protected as part of the Alamo Square Landmark District. They're deemed a unique and irreplaceable asset to the city at the same time that the zoning code considers them too big and dense. On top of the pre-war housing, New York City in particular had a building boom in the 60s and to a lesser extent 70s, whose drop-off was a central observation of an economics paper from 2003 called "Why is Manhattan So Expensive?" that was a big inspiration behind YIMBYism. From 1980 onwards, there has been a marked drop-off in the number of new apartments in Manhattan, despite a growing economy, robust demand, and escalating prices. Construction has increased since bottoming out in the 90s, but these cities still don't build all that much housing. Here are the 30 biggest metro areas in the US according to housing permits in the past few years. New York is below average and San Francisco is near the bottom. These are metro areas, so they include the suburbs because housing markets are regional. But New York City and the city of San Francisco aren't substantially higher than their metro area averages. The most permits come from Texas and the South. Austin, Texas beats everywhere else by a large margin. Denver, Seattle, and Minneapolis are all above average. If you're wondering whether these are mostly single-family homes, in Atlanta and Charlotte, yes. But Austin, Denver, Seattle, and Minneapolis all have more than half of their permits in apartments of 5 units or more. If New York and San Francisco wanted to take housing seriously, they would respond to having the highest rents in the country by permitting the most housing in the country. If we plot housing permits against rents, we can see basically 3 categories. Places like New York, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, and Boston don't permit a lot of housing and have high rents, averaging $2,500 to $3,000 a month or higher across the metro area. Places like Austin, Houston, Denver, Seattle, and Minneapolis permit more housing and have more moderate rents, mostly between $1,500 and $2,000. And finally, places like Detroit, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis have rents on the lower end without building much housing, suggesting that there's not a ton of unmet demand to live there, whether for economic reasons or whatever else. What we don't find here are places that build a ton and have very high rents. If they did exist, they would go here. Technically, what we care about, though, isn't how much each city builds so much as how much they build relative to demand. If San Francisco and Detroit build a similar amount of housing, that might be enough for Detroit but not for San Francisco. One way to measure this is the rental vacancy rate. What percentage of rentals are currently available? Cities like New York and Boston have low vacancy rates and high rents. Cities like Houston and Pittsburgh have high vacancy rates and relatively low rents. The correlation isn't perfect. San Francisco actually has an average vacancy rate despite very high rents. It actually used to have one of the lowest vacancy rates in 2015 and 2016, but then it spiked during COVID, and so far it's stayed a bit higher than the other expensive cities. In general, though, it's pretty clear. Cities with higher vacancy rates tend to have lower rents. We can also look directly at housing supply regulations. The San Francisco and New York metro areas are number 1 and number 2 for the strictest regulations in the country, according to the Wharton Residential Land Use Regulation Index, which surveyed builders on how easy it is to build in their jurisdiction. The survey covered approval timelines, density limits, availability of zoned land, community input, fees, and lots of other things. Not just for dense infill development, but also new subdivisions of single-family homes. Remember though, the YIMBY position is not that only density can move the needle on affordability. Building up and building out can both meaningfully add to housing supply. It's just that building denser has advantages like getting more housing from the same amount of land and letting people live close to jobs and transit. If we plot the regulation index versus rents, we can see clearly that the more regulated metro areas have higher rents. There's one more useful way to compare cities: housing supply elasticity, which is economists speak for whether an increase in housing prices leads to an increase in building. A 2010 analysis found that New York and San Francisco are both near the bottom for supply elasticity. When prices go up, builders can't respond by building more, so prices continue to rise. Again, it's those cities in Texas and the South that score highest on elasticity, with other metro areas like Washington, D.C., Denver, and Minneapolis coming out ahead of New York and San Francisco. So there you have it. San Francisco and New York having high rents does not dispute the argument made by supply and density advocates. As metro areas, they have below average housing permitting rates, medium to low vacancy rates, the most tightly regulated building environments in the US according to a survey of builders, and low supply elasticity as measured by economists. These measures show from different perspectives how these cities are very far from being YIMBY home building paradises, even though they happen to be pretty dense by US standards. Some people from these two cities will defend their records by saying that they're built up and hemmed in by water and/or mountains. They couldn't possibly build as much housing as in the past or as the other cities that have more open land available. It's true that having empty land on the edge within commuting distance provides a convenient outlet for new supply, without shaking up things with homeowners in existing neighborhoods. But the challenge for densification is mainly political, not physical or geographical. There are literally projects in both places that are proposed by developers that get turned down by the city. They could start by not doing that. They could re-legalize heights and densities that used to be allowed in the past. Remember all the buildings that couldn't be built today? They could upzone to allow high-rises within walking distance of every transit station, like the recent reforms in the Canadian province of British Columbia. In general, we need to stop thinking about affordability as coming from a particular built form. It's not like reaching a certain density number or having a particular type of housing unlocks affordability. Housing is affordable when it's abundant relative to demand. The exact same modest detached homes in the San Francisco Bay Area that used to be accessible to the middle class are now only accessible to rich people because there aren't enough of them relative to demand. And when there's a shortage of something, rich people are the ones who can outbid everyone else. Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.